Good afternoon, everyone. Greetings from Jakarta, Indonesia, and um, good afternoon and good morning to everyone of you who joined the discussion today through the live YouTube of Sahabat ICW. And today we will have a very interesting discussions about corruption perception index and anti-corruption efforts, which will be highlighting the best practices from Denmark and also Lithuania. And we will also discussing the commitment of Indonesia's in eradicating corruption. And this public discussion today is organized collaboratively between Indonesia Corruption Watch and the Indonesian Students Union in Denmark, as well as Indonesian Students Union in Lithuania. And first of all, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Seira Tamara, and I'm a political corruption researcher from Indonesia Corruption Watch. And I will be the moderator for our discussion today. And ladies and gentlemen, there will be three amazing speakers with us today, and they will sharing their expertise and experiences in combating corruption, as well as their advocacy in creating a more transparent and accountable government in their respective countries through their work in their organizations. And before we start our discussion today, I will introduce our speakers. First of all, we will have Miss Ingrida Kaulina Skiene, and she is the CEO of Transparency International Lithuania. Hi, Miss Ingrida. Thank you so much.
Hello. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with us in this discussion today. And also, we will have Tamima Ashila as one of our speakers today. She is a public campaigner in Indonesia Corruption Watch, who will also join us and share her expertise. Hi, Tamima.
Hello, Sarah. Hello, Ingrida, and all participants.
Thank you so much for your time today. And we will also have Mr. Jesper Olsen as our speaker, but he will join the Zoom later. And he is the chairman of Transparency International Denmark. And I think that's all for all of the brief introduction about our speakers. And for the first speaker, I will give the opportunity to Tamima to share the reflection of Indonesia's corruption eradication effort, especially especially we have known in Indonesia there are several or various attempts to weaken the effort of anti-corruption movement that occurred during the President Joko Widodo regime, which also had an impact on the decline of Indonesia's corruption perception index during his second term as a president. And we will hear more about this from Tamima, and we will have a further session of discussion later. Please, Ms. Tamima, to share your presentation. Time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Okay, I will share my presentation. Okay, you can see you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this discussion. I'm Tamima Asila, a campaign officer of Indonesia Corruption Watch. A short introduction, Indonesia Corruption Watch, or ICW, is an organization in Jakarta. We are working for anti-corruption, democratic, and also good governance issues. And today, I give the title of my presentation is Destroying the Corrupt Ecosystem in Indonesia, Corruption Law Enforcement Reform and Strengthening Public Capacity in Combating Corruption. And for talking about this issue, let's start with Indonesia CPI. For your information, CPI is Corruption Perception Index, the indicator of the index to see how is our effort in anti-corruption movement that published by Transparency International, included Transparency International Indonesia. And this is the diagram of Indonesia CPI score from 2012 to 2023. Indonesia CPI has fluctuated over the past 10 years. As you can see, and our base CPI scores was recorded in 2019. This one, we achieved a score of 40 and ranked 85th out of 180 countries worldwide. The interesting one is there is the different trend before and after 2019. In 2016 to 2017, our CPI score was 37 and it increased to 38 in 2018. And the 10 is increased before 2019. But when we see the trend after 2019, our CPI tend to decrease. One question we should ask is why and what happened with Indonesia anti-corruption movement or Indonesia anti-corruption eradication effort. Maybe some of you remember that in September 2019, we faced a large or a massive demonstration to protest about the bad regulation. One of them is the revision of Corruption Eradication Commission Law or revisi Undang-Undang KPK. And this is have a big impact to our anti-corruption movement because the revision of KPK law was review some of power and authority of KPK and then impact to the anti-corruption effort of Indonesia. The refight is held in 2019 and then after that we are facing the bad condition of our anti-corruption movement. So I will back to the title of our discussion, how is Indonesia's commitment to corruption eradication? Okay, to understand Indonesia's effort, we have to talk about enforcement and also preventive effort. I will start it by enforcement effort. There are 3 points that I will to talk. First one is systematic weakening of this effort or of the anti-corruption effort by political forces. It's connected with what I said before about the revision of KPK law or Corruption Eradication Commission law. It's one of the one kind or one example of the systematic weakening from political forces to our anti-corruption eradication effort. And the second one is the regulation not support us yet to fight against corruption. We have some regulation actually, but it's haven't been effective yet. And currently, we are as a civil society coalition is continuing to push to give a pressure to legislative and also government officials to approve the asset recovery regulation, or we familiar with the term RUU Perampasan Aset. This one is the important regulation that will enhance or improve our effort in anti-corruption. So the third one is life sentence for corruptors. The punishment for the corruptors is aiming to give the deterrent effect. But in the fact, according to Indonesia Corruption Watch data in 2023, the average prison sentence for corruption is only 3 years and 4 months. It's actually shorter than an undergraduate study period. So maybe you will ask, so how long the ideal time to give the sentence to the corruptors? We can give them 20 years actually or lifetime prison. It depends on their cases. On the other side, the average fine of corruptors is only 180 million rupiah. It's so far away from the losses that we got. In 2023, the total losses due to corruption in Indonesia amounted to 28.4 trillion rupiah. And after talk about enforcement effort, let's talk about preventive effort. When we talk about preventive effort, we will talk about 2 approach. The first one is anti-corruption education. The second one is monitoring the wealth of public officials. These 2 methods are there's 2 approach that always did by KPK year by year to prevent the corruption. Actually, we have many creative efforts to prevent the corruption. For example, we have anti-corruption buses, we have anti-corruption movie festival, and some many others. But sometimes these initiatives are limited to ceremonial activities rather than a real impact. In the right side, if you can see the integrity index, integrity index is like an indicator to measure the integrity of public servant and also government officials that held by KPK. In 2023, we got 74 point of our integrity index, but what we got is just 70.97. And it was decreased for the year before in 2022 that we got 71.94. It also was decreased from the year before that we got 72.43. I think we have so many challenges to make our anti-corruption movement be better. And to achieve meaningful progress, we must continue to strengthen both between the enforcement and also preventive effort, and ensure the political will to tackle corruption at all levels. So the next one is, sorry. Okay. Someone asked to me, is corruption only about the government problem? Because we talk a lot about the government approach, the government effort, and the etc. But I can say that it's totally not, because when we talk about corruption, we also talk about public, we also talk about private sector and etc. And I want to say that in the corruption ecosystem, we must consider the roles of the public, the system, and state officials. Okay. Unfortunately, I want to say that we are trapped in a corrupt ecosystem. This is the diagram that I draw to show about the toxic ecosystem or the corrupt ecosystem. Let's begin with bad system. A bad system that includes poor regulation, weak law enforcement, and also corrupt public services. And what we face every day is one example is petty bribery or illegal payment. Maybe we're familiar with the term of pungutan liar or pungli. It's the impact from the bad system of our government and anti-corruption effort. The second one is complicated bureaucracy that triggers corruption. We can face it every day and everywhere in Indonesia. And it will connect it to the second point, that public as a victim and also an actor in this corrupt ecosystem. For example, when we want to make an ID card or driver's license, we have to pay an illegal fee. At one point, we are a victim of the bad system. But when we do or when we pay, we are an actors of this bad ecosystem, because we bribe the officials and we get our driver's license and extra. But this is a bad situation actually, because as a public, we can be a victim and also be an actor in this corrupt ecosystem. So, in this toxic and corrupt ecosystem, we can observe a reciprocal chain of supply and demand. I don't know who will be a supply and who will be the demand, uh, but this is an ecosystem, the best ecosystem that we are facing every day, and we must put a stop to it, close the demand space, and refuse to be a supplier. And the third point of this ecosystem is corrupt public officials. Corrupt public officials is frequently normalizing the complicated bureaucracy, because the complicated bureaucracy will triggers the corruption and give the space for them to do the corrupt action. And also the lack integrity of the public official that will make this toxic ecosystem always been there, and we are trapped in this corrupt ecosystem. So talking about normalizing, I want to talk about 3 points that maybe we face it frequently in our daily life. The first one is conflict of interest, or In ICW, we usually say CHOI, conflict of interest. This is actually easily to identifiable, and we can realize that conflict of interest is so many help in around us. I want to give you the example of the bad impact from the conflict of interest. In 2020, in 2020, we revised the mining and coal regulation, and some members of the working committee were affiliated with the coal industry. Can you suggest what the regulation they approve? They make the regulation that give 0% royalty obligation for coal industry businessmen. Yeah, because they are a part of this industry, and then they make a regulation that benefited them. It's because of conflict of interest. The second one is gratification. Gratification is not just a giving a gift, actually. Gratification is corruption. But we are conditioned to accept action that we should be skeptical for. For example, in the gratification. When a businessman provides gifts or favor to public officials and their families, is it really just a simple gift or just giving gift? If we think so, we are naive. Gratification is like planting seeds that will be reaped in the future. It's different with bribe, where the bribery is we pay and we got the benefit immediately. But the gratification is different. But gratification is time. It is the part of corruption. And the last is unaccountable public services. As the public, we often find it difficult to get transparency and accountability from public service. We often hear that information for public institution is classified as a secret. Uh, Actually, this is wrong because all activities funded by taxpayer money are public matters, and we have the right to know about them. We have to ask the responsibility of public servant, and also make all of the public service transparent and accountable. So, what should we do in this situation, in this corrupt ecosystem? We face some difficult to make anti-corruption movement stronger and the etc. So what should we do? Mm, I have to answer actually to answer the question. What should we do to strengthening our anti-corruption effort? The first one is press for law enforcement reform and a better government system. Point one, apply public pressure on the legislature and president to approve the asset recovery law. It is very important because, like we discussed before, the sentence to the corruptors is just short term, like 3 years, and then we cannot give them the deterrent effect. Asset recovery will give the deterrent effect for the corruptors, and then it will make our anti-corruption movement more effective. First one is we have to pressure the legislative and president to approve this regulation. The second one is monitoring government accountability by offering critics and refusing to tolerate corrupt practice. We can give the critic because this is our right to monitor it, to monitor the government and also give the critic. And it's connected to the third one to express our criticism throughout social media and direct advocation. If we have an opportunity to say immediately to the government, it will be better. But on the other side, we also can give our critics from the social media and show that we also monitor what they are working for. And the last is conduct massive grassroots education and anti-corruption public campaign. Conduct a broad grassroots education with local approach and show the proximity of each issue in that education. We are a large country. We have a different culture. then the local approach is important to make a grassroots education. The anti-corruption problem in East Java is totally different with in East Borneo. And then the local approach is important to make this grassroots education effective. The second one is raising the awareness with pop culture. With public campaign, we can use the digital content, film, music, and other pop culture to raise the public awareness of anti-corruption movement. And the last is spread an integrity ecosystem in our peers, in our family, with our partner, with our friend, and the extra. And the last one, maybe we can answer how is Indonesia's commitment to corruption eradication effort. We have a regulation, we have institution and law enforcement office. We have some stuff that support our anti-corruption movement actually, but sometimes it not be effective yet. And the last one I wanna ask to you all, please put your answer on the comment. Do we still have hope of making Indonesia free from corruption? Yeah, I always have a hope, and I wish that we can um, we can achieve our goal to make Indonesia cleaner and also free from the corruption. Thank you so much. I will give back this forum to the moderator. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Tamima, for the very insightful presentation, and we have heard from her, especially in the last slides of her presentation about what is needed to improve the current situation that happened in Indonesia. And I think the discussion that we held today is a part of the mechanism that we can keep trying to do, because it's one of the anti-corruption public campaigns and discussions to spread more about the awareness of the corruption itself, so that people can have more information about can have a better understanding about corruption, and finally can contribute and know their part, know their kind of contribution that they can do to make a more transparent and accountable government of Indonesia. Thank you so much, Tamima, for the presentation. And for the next session, I would like to give the opportunity to Ms. Ingrida to share the presentation. And in this session, we hope that we can hear more from you about how Lithuania can maintain to have a good score of CPI especially in the last 10 years, where the CPI of Lithuania is always increased every year. And also I think it's very insightful to hear also from you about the latest situation of anti-corruption movement in Lithuania as well, including the biggest challenge that the people of Lithuania face in combating the corruption itself. Please, Ms. Ingrida, time is yours.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you all for the invitation. Good morning from Vilnius, Lithuania, to all the different corners that you are in. I'm happy to share our experience in Lithuania. For starters, it makes sense to introduce myself better. So my name is Ingrida Kalinauskienė. I'm the CEO of Transparency International Lithuania. We are a data-driven public policy organization focusing on the topics of transparency, anti-corruption, and good governance. In comparison to Indonesia, Lithuania is a much smaller country. If we were to look at the population numbers, we are nearly 3 million inhabitants in the country. So it's worth keeping this in mind than listening to my presentation and my insights as well, because I am aware that sometimes it is more complicated to achieve change in a much larger society. So I will in the short presentation, what I hope to do is to present the CPI scores for Lithuania, but also cover why it's not sufficient to look at the CPI in order to understand the actual problems in the particular context. And then I hope that we can dig deeper during the discussion that we have later on. I'm happy to take the questions. If you have them during the presentation, just put them in the chat. I'm sure that we can see them in the chat as well. Happy to take them and share more materials in the chat too. So without any further ado, I will just put the slides up. Good. So if we were to look at the corruption perception index, that's how our world looks like. From the title of this discussion, I assume that everyone is familiar with this particular map. What this basically means that the lighter the color, the less corrupt the less corrupt country is, the darker the color, the more corruption risks there are. Corruption perception index is a very macro measurement. Basically, it has its pros and cons, but what this measurement helps to do until today, this is the only measurement that helps you to compare all the countries, the majority of the countries of the world in terms of the levels of corruption, to see the challenges and the historical perspective. So that's one of the indications looking at the very macro level issues. So basically, if we were to zoom into our region, to the Baltic states and Poland, and you can see the dark blue line, which shows Lithuania as a result, we are pretty much in the moving around the similar points year to year. The leader in the region is Estonia. As you can see, it's a bit higher up in red. And then Lithuania looks slightly better than Latvia, but I would say we're in a pretty similar position and better than Poland. What this means? So we have 61 points of 100, and in the index of 2023, we were 34 out of 180 countries. Our score is basically the average of the European Union, because European Union's average is 64 points out of 100. So we are like average participants of the EU in that regard. If we were looking at the history and historical context of Lithuania and our transition from the Soviet Union to the independent democratic state, Lithuania has made some progress. If we were to look at the other post-Soviet countries' scores, they are worse than Lithuania's. So in that regard, it shows that investment into the different initiatives to strengthen the rule of law and democratic governance mechanisms really could be visible from the improvement of the score as well. At the same time, looking at the CPI, it's very difficult to explain what needs to be done on the country level. Like, where are the major challenges? How can we know that we are progressing or not? Like, from the CPI scores, we know that in Lithuania, we still need to put more effort to reduce the level of bribery, especially in the healthcare sector. We also know that we need to focus more on political corruption because that remains one of the bigger challenges if we were to move to the higher level of scores. And this movement from 60 points to over 70 is clearly indicated in the priorities of the government of Lithuania. So in order to make that leap and to move a little bit higher, we really need to focus on political corruption. However, it's, as I said, you can understand the trends and direction, but it's difficult to understand how you're doing and how you can actually measure your success. So for that, we need to focus on other types of measurements and to look deeper into different sectors. And now I would like to share some of the tendencies that we see in Lithuania. I know that some numbers might be difficult to put in the context, so I'm happy to do as much as possible during the presentation, but if you will have any questions, as I mentioned, just put them in the chat and I'm happy to answer them. So as I mentioned, one of the directions is to open up the politics in Lithuania, to focus more on the issue of political corruption. And we, as TI Lithuania, we look for ways how we can gather more data to understand if we are moving forward or not. So looking at the latest trends, for example, the data that we have and what we can see is that since the beginning of the term, Lithuania's members of parliament have declared almost 2,000 meetings with lobbyists and interest groups. This is how it looks like, this measurement. And what we basically did is that we opened up the working calendars of our members of parliament. We looked at all the meetings that are published there, and then we separated the ones that are related to the meetings with various interest groups, registered lobbyists, and others. What we basically wanted to do is to understand if our elected officials meet with various representatives from interest groups and with registered lobbyists. Why we did that approach? Because the public opinion or the general opinion was that our members of parliament do not meet with lobbyists, that lobbying doesn't happen. And at that time, the law on lobbying was not effectively enforced. Our approach was to look at the meetings, advocate for having more meetings on the agenda, with the clear statement that the good politician is an active and transparent politician, saying that we expect our elected politicians to meet with as diverse groups as possible in order to hear their opinions and then to put this into law, thinking about how to make a balanced and sound decision. Because basically what we want from our elected politicians is to make sound decisions, and that we know that they thought about different aspects of that. So we did those calculations for 12 parliamentary sessions, and as you can see from the slide here. And we now have much more data on what's actually happening in the parliament. In fact, this small exercise also encouraged our parliament to open up more data, and Lithuanian parliament is one of the more open parliaments in the world. It also helped to simplify some of the technical aspects of how members of parliament publish their meetings in their working calendars to make this exercise more convenient for them. We also looked, in comparison to the Lithuanian parliament, we look how Lithuania's members of the European Parliament announce their meetings. So only 5 out of 11 do that, so there is still some progress that needs to be done. And we also checked how our local authorities in Lithuania, we have 60 municipalities, and we elect councils to those municipalities, how they publish their meetings, and is this standard that we are trying to put in, that we are hoping to, is this standard that our elected members of parliament do on the national level? Is it followed in the municipal level, and what can we see there? So we see that they started to publish more meetings as well. With this initiative, I would like to illustrate that sometimes you don't need very complicated or very difficult national level approaches in order to change the situation. You really have to think about the resources you have, the time frame that you can spend on this particular issue, and then the goal that you would like to achieve. So I hope this clarifies this particular initiative a bit better. Moving on, the other area that needs more focus on is municipal transparency. Why is that? It's because municipalities are the institutions that are closest to the citizens. Basically, if a citizen has any type of question related to the reconstruction of pavement, lighting outside of the buildings, building permits, or anything else, or if they have children, their children go to municipality or controlled kindergartens. The schools are municipality controlled as well. So basically, all the services that we get during our day, they are related to the municipality. So this means that if we want to empower citizens and to feel that they are the owners of their own city and of their environment, they need to understand whom to contact with the type of question that they have. So we started the initiative of evaluating the transparency of our municipalities back in 2014. And you can see a small chart over here. And what we basically did, we virtually traveled through the websites of 60 municipalities in Lithuania to check what type of data they publish on their websites. We wanted to understand if it's clear, if we can find information about the structure of municipality, if we can find the financial reports, if we can find anti-corruption programs and implementation plans in order to understand what municipality is doing in terms of addressing the risks of corruption. And if it's possible to find information about how to engage for the citizens into the municipalities matters. So in 2014, the average score of the municipalities was 56 out of 100. And fast forward to 2022, you can see that this number increased to 85 out of 100. What this basically means is that municipalities understood that it's important to publish information on their websites. But I think one of the more important achievements is that the information in the area on how to engage for the citizens into municipalities matters increased during this time. Because back in 2014, information about the participation for citizens was the area that was scoring the lowest in comparison to the other questions. And then we advocated for municipalities to try and to implement participatory budgeting exercises. That's when a municipality allocates a certain amount of money for the citizens to decide, to suggest their own ideas and then to vote for those ideas. And the ones that receive the most votes are selected for the implementation. In 2018, we had one municipality who tested this approach, and now in 2024, we have 52 out of 60, with 3 municipalities thinking to implement this in the nearest future. And since 2018, residents have been already invited to jointly allocate approximately 14.4 million euros. This is not a silver bullet. It's not that participatory budgeting is going to solve all the issues on the municipal level, but it's an experimental method in order to understand how municipalities and citizens can create better connections, how they can strengthen their trust in each other, and look for solutions to their municipality together. So that's the good case example. On a more negative note related to the municipal transparency, one of the challenges remain that during the latest evaluation, 10% of the municipalities did not publish any information about their corruption risk management approaches, meaning that we do not see corruption prevention program or its implementation plan on the websites of municipalities, meaning that it's very difficult to understand what they're actually doing in order to manage corruption-related risks in their activities. The last area that I would like to focus on is related to the media. We are all consumers of media. And the question is, do we know enough about who owns the media outlet that we are reading? So we've been conducting an exercise of mapping information from different sources in order to see who owns the media outlets in the country. And we also cross-checked the data with the data of the elections in order to see in which cases the owners of the media outlet are connected to politics. And we see that around 10% of the media outlets were owners of around 10% of media outlets were related to politics in one way or another. This is not necessarily an issue or a big problem in itself. The question is how the ownership is disconnected from the editorial room of the media outlet, and how the editorial room can make the decisions independently, so that the political views are not transferred to the end user. We also mapped the public spending that goes to the different media outlets, and again checked for the connections with the politicians. You can see the numbers in the slide. I will not go into too much detail related to that. This was more just to tell that media transparency is one of the areas that is important to think about as well, because we are media consumers and we make our own opinion or views based on the media. So thank you so much. Happy to take the questions. And I also wanted to use the opportunity to tell you more about the Transparency School, which is happening in Lithuania every summer. So if you are interested in the topic, please take a look at the website transparencyschool.org. We will shortly publish the dates for the next edition. And I hope that one day you will join our community of alumni as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ingrida, for your presentation. It's very delightful to have known and heard from you about how the current situation is going in Lithuania, especially to know that there is such a transparent system that already that owned by Lithuania in the context of media transparency, and also the transparency of the politicians, because in the context of comparing it with Indonesia, we don't really have that kind of good, transparent, and still have to work more to improve the transparency of our politics systems, of our member of parliaments, and also as well as the media. And for the next session is actually the time for Mr. Jesper Olsen to share his perspective and also presentations, but I think he hasn't joined the meeting yet, so I think we can still have the discussion between the speakers, between Tamima, Ms. Ingrida, and also another participants that already here before we while we are waiting for Mr. Jesper to join us and also can share his perspective. And also I will check the questions in the Q&A box, and apparently there's already 2 questions that can we discuss in these sessions, and I think I will give the time for Ms. Ingrida and also Tamima to answer the questions one by one, and I will maybe give the first opportunity to Ms. Ingrida to answer the question. We already have 2 questions here.
Sure.
Yeah. Do you want me to read the questions for you, or?
No, it's fine. I will rephrase it because I
Okay.
can see it. I'm not sure if all the participants see it, but we have a question whether every government agency in Lithuania, for example, at the ministry level, have a unit tasked with enforcing transparency, anti-corruption, or is it only regulated by a centralized regulation? So this is a fantastic question coming from the audience. We usually joke that Lithuania is a sort of an anti-corruption lab, in a way that we have, at the moment, we have all the major anti-corruption laws and regulations in the country. So if you were to think about a certain regulation related to anti-corruption, chances are high that we would have it in Lithuania. To answer more concretely the question, so with the new law on corruption prevention, which came into force in 2022, every public sector institution has to has to publicly share what type of measures they take against corruption, and to publish the corruption prevention program and implementation plan on their website. And they also should dedicate a particular position, a staff position, which would be the anti-corruption officer in that particular institution. So on the one hand, the regulation is on the national level, but then it delegates the mandate to different institutions and organizations, and basically tries to shift the conversation on who's responsible for the anti-corruption progress in the country, because historically, everyone believed that law enforcement institutions are the ones who are responsible for the progress in anti-corruption. And we are now trying to move from the conversation that we need the laws, we need to have a strong enforcement, to the actual change of behavior and culture in different institutions and organizations. And that's when the most responsibility lies on the shoulders of the leaders of those organizations, on the heads of those organizations. Because first, the leadership of the organization has to understand that this is an important matter and be interested in changing the situation in their own organizations. So that's the switch that we are trying to make in the country, and that's why different organizations have to have those requirements internally as well. I hope I answered the question. If not, just feel free to submit an additional one, and happy to follow up.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Ingrida, to answer the first questions regarding the special unit in Lithuania, whether there is a special unit in Lithuania to with a task to enforcing transparency and the anti-corruption in Lithuania. Apparently, we have the second questions that is also interesting to discuss, especially in the time of now in Indonesia. We already held our presidential election in the last February, and we will hold the next election for regional head in this November. And the second question is apparently stating about the circle of political corruption, where the candidates or the politicians seeks for the funding from the third parties, such as the businessmen. They got a big funding to fund their campaigns, and finally, when they successfully elected, they tend to pay back to the businessman because of they already been supported in their campaign period. And how do they pay back to the businessman is sometimes by making by conducting a corruption itself, because they will implement the interest of the businessman to the policy that they are currently creating, and it makes that the politician is not running for the good for the people and not creating a better policy for the people, but for the betterment of the businessmen, because they already supported them before. So the question is how to improve the political funding system to make it more transparent and corruption free. And before I give the time to Ms. Ingrida, I will also I would like to give the time to Tamima to share her perspective regarding this matter, because this matter is also massively happen in Indonesia. Tamima, please.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. How to improve the political funding? The answer is to reform the political funding system in Indonesia. Today, ICW and also some of civil society organization is pushing for the reform of political party funding. We want to limit funding from private sectors. Like Sarah said before, that when the politician got the funding or support from the businessman, they will give it back when they got the position. And then to reform this system is to limit the funding from private sector and increase the funding from the state or from APBN. And then because if party funds come from the state, we can hold them accountable more easily. We can ask the accountability and transparency from them because uh, they fund by us as a taxpayer. So actually, the other thing that we can do is make a fundraising. PSI, one of the party in Indonesia, um, at I forget, maybe in 2014, they have a fundraising. They get the fund from the public to their campaign, and then they also have the responsibility to the public. And then one question is to reform our political party funding system and to increase the amount of state funding to the political party. And then we can ask the responsibility and accountability from them easily. I think this is the answer for me, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you so much, yeah, for showing, for giving you the current situation in Indonesia and also sharing your perspective because like we have said before, the current thing are massively happen in Indonesia, and even the idea of giving the fund to the political party uh, make it 100% or at least dominated by the state budget is really it's still far because yeah, a lot of defensive, a lot of political party and the politician itself are going defensive because they are unfortunately acting for now like the political party is a private institution and not a and not a public institution which have to have a transparent governance and also accountability about their funding report and also about the governance of the body itself. Um, Maybe we can know more about this matter from Ms. Ingrida. Do you have any other perspective, especially looking for the current situation or status quo in Lithuania?
Sure, thank you so much for the question. So basically what we have in Lithuania related to the political finance regulation is that private companies cannot support candidates. We have a ban on that. And there have been research conducted that actually this helped that looked at the correlation of the restriction for private companies to support candidates and also competition in public procurement. And after this, they saw an increase in competition in public procurement. So if you will be looking for data in this area, I'm happy to share this article with you. The other thing that I think is important to focus on is to having this data publicly available and as soon as possible, as in who supports different political candidates, because that what still happens, for example, in Lithuania as well. We just now had the election to the parliament, and our Central Electoral Commission collects all the information about the finances related to their campaign. But then we will only get to see the audited financial accounts from all the political parties around 1 year later. So that's a pretty long period of time, because basically what you want to know is how much money, not only the overall money that has been spent on the campaign, but where that money came from, and to see the trends and tendencies and to check for any potential risks related to that. So I would say that it's also very important to have the access to data as soon as possible and to have it in the format that helps you to compare different candidates. And one thing is, when we talk about the parliament elections, when we don't have that many members that we are electing, And a totally different conversation is about the election to the municipalities. In your case, I understand that's where the question about the regional leaders comes up from. You have many more candidates. And then in order to understand how the money is moving and who is supporting whom, it's important to get access to that data.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ms. Ingrida, to add more information and context regarding this matter. And apparently we already have Mr. Jesper Olsen here with us. Hi, Mr. Jesper.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And we already had the session of the previous two speakers, Ms. Ingrida and Tamima, already shared their material and also their perspective regarding the anti-corruption efforts in each countries, Lithuania and also Indonesia. And I think now we can go into the next session where we can hear more from you about how is the current situation of anti-corruption movement in Denmark. Especially, it's really amazing to know more about Denmark has a very good scores of CPI and also has a very least corruption cases. It's very important, especially for our country, Indonesia, to learn more and to know more about the best practices, so we can adapt, we can implement it in our country and do better with our anti-corruption movement in our country. So yeah, please, Mr. Jesper, time is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. And I'm very much looking forward to the next hour. And welcome to Denmark. I'm just sitting here in my office, just on the other side of the Danish Parliament. So I can actually see the Prime Minister's office here from my office, and she's not in the meeting now. I can see there's still there's no light on. But I was very happy about the invitation, and one of the things that I'm quite often invited to events like this, due to the fact that Denmark is on the top of the CPI, and we have been on the top for many years. And then a lot of people come to Denmark and say, "What can we learn from you? What is the miracle cure on anti-corruption?" And the bad news is that there is no miracle cure. And the other bad news is that the CPI is a perception index, and the CPI is a measurement of what you're looking for. So there's no miracle, and I will not be able to come back to you with, if you do that and that and that, then you will be number one in a few years. And actually, there is a disadvantage of being number one, because when we have a discussion on matters related to corruption, the politician will say, "Yeah, but we live in a country where the level of corruption is so low that you can't really measure it. So it doesn't exist." There is a perception in this country among many people, and especially in the political environment, that anti-corruption is a part of the vaccination program for children, so that we are vaccinated against corruption, which is not true. And I would say that this is actually seen from the perspective of our organization, that is a real struggle. Because we have to prove that it is here in order to be taken serious, in order to do the preventive measures. If you want to know a little bit about Denmark and the history of anti-corruption, it goes more than 200 years back. In the beginning of the 18th century, Denmark was almost bankrupt. We have had lots of wars, especially with Sweden. And the Danish kings, they saw that they were not able to finance the rebuilding of the armed forces due to corruption. So two of the kings, they set up a really heavy anti-corruption program in order to make sure that the money stayed within the state and within the defense, building up military capacity instead of in the civil servants' private pockets. So it has been on a top priority for the state for more than 200 years. And I think they, in the beginning of the 18th century, I think they did something very wise, because the kings decided that they would imprison some of the civil servants that were corrupt, but they would not execute them. So they had should we say, some sort of balanced approach to this, and we can still see that, and we can still see the effect of that. So that is one thing. It has been a top priority, and it has been a top priority from the kings in the early days. The second thing I think that this is very important is that the Danish policy is based on two pillars. One is a strong state on the judiciary. There's very much trust in the judiciary. There's very much trust in the police. Quite effective laws. If you look on all the scores on that matter, you can also see that Denmark is a very robust state based on the rule of law. But the other pillar is a very good social policy. And Denmark is a rich country, and it's also an egalitarian country. There's not that many different. There's of course some people who are very rich, and of course some people who are very poor. But the average is that we have a good social welfare state and a good economy among lots of people. The unemployment rates are low, and we also have a very sort of efficient social welfare state. And one of the key numbers that I always look into is the health sector, because it is my perception that if you ask if your father is very ill, and the question about life and death is his ability to get the right medical treatment, would I then bribe the doctor if that was a question of death and life for my father? Of course, because then it comes so close to home, so close to your personal life. And that's why we very much monitor the health sector. And still, even though there are resource problems in the health sector, we don't see any signs that the trust within the healthcare sector is very, very high. And we rarely don't see any cases in the healthcare sector. And I think that is a sign of some sort of healthy approach. What we also see is that we rarely have any cases among the front office in the social sector. When we dig into the numbers behind the CPI and see what is the driving, what are the drivers for our scores, it is also that Denmark is perceived as a very good country to do business. We have a very healthy, in general, business culture. And if you go to have business here, you rarely don't have any problems with civil servants. We have on when you have to do your taxes or your VAT or your social permits for your employees, etc., etc. That part of the Danish administration is also very effective, and we also see that Denmark is one of the countries that are scoring very high on the use of digital administration, and that businesses also have very easy access to digital self-management in relation with the public sector. But and now we come to the buts, because is corruption also a problem in Denmark? Yes, of course, it is a problem everywhere. And I always say when during speeches like this that people from other countries that has another score on the CPI, they have nothing to be embarrassed of, because this is a social factor, and we will see it everywhere. And also one of the things that I would like to highlight is that if we look at the numbers also from Eurobarometer is the European Union Statistics Office. When it comes to the numbers of bribes, Denmark have a very low score. It happens, but a very low score. But if you look at the numbers where people are asked, do you use your personal connections to get services from the public sector? Then we score at the same level as France and Italy. And I mentioned France and Italy because they are countries that are also perceived to have problems with corruption, and also corruption in politics. And if we look into the business environment and ask what is it necessary to have good political connections in order to do business, you can also see that we have not a very high level, but we have some high level of scores that say that it is necessary to have good political connections in order to do business. And that is also why we in Transparency International Denmark is very keen on the problem with the lack of transparency in financing of the political parties. We have, of course, we have some legislation, but it is barely no legislation. And there are so many loopholes that you can actually use, and there's no effective tools to monitor. The press has some attention to it, but they also have a problem to get behind the numbers and get behind the mechanisms. And some of the problem comes to the fact that we are, in general, a very wealthy country, simply because in Denmark, the economic situation is so good that you can actually bribe without putting the money in a brown envelope, because you can do a lot of these connections legally. And if we look at the political level, we can also see that they can give themselves extra salaries, or they can hire more people to the staff, all in an environment and a saying that we need to strengthen political parties, we need to strengthen democracy, etc., etc. And then we have some sort of, what should we say, rock wool layer around the political environment. So sometimes I'm more and more beginning to talk about corruption in a Danish perspective, not that as the abuse of entrusted power, but the use of entrusted power for personal gain, and more systematically. So in general, I think there are lots of lessons to learn from Denmark. Some of the good ones is, if I can sum it up, very much attention to the rule of law, very much attention to the social welfare state, but also that we have to tackle that the perception that it is not a problem is also a problem, because that stand and is one of the reasons why it's very difficult to get into these things and to get the political attention, because in all preventive policies it is so much and it's so difficult to advocate, to get resources, to get priorities to something you can't see. So and that is my final lesson, and I have also thought a lot about this for the last week since the election in the United States. Sometimes perhaps we should not talk about corruption. Sometimes we should not talk about the corrupt politicians, but we should talk about what happens when we have corrupt politicians, and what are the disadvantages, and what are the cases, and what is at stake for the trust within the society. Because, and that would be my final remark, I'm talking with journalists almost every day, and I never use the word corruption, because if I use it, then people will not trust me. If I use it, people will not read it. They will think, oh, but he'll just look for it everywhere. So I talk about the phenomenon, I talk about the problem, I talk about how they hamper the environment. I talk about all the phenomena, but I never use the word, because if I use the word, then the case is that we will not get any further, and that will not be a positive development. And at my point, the situation where we will not see it, and we have the perception and the self-perception that this is not a problem, that is really dangerous, because then we will not see it until it's too late.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jesper, to share your perspective and also to give us more insights about the current situation in Denmark, because apparently a lot, maybe it's my assumption, maybe a lot of people will think that when we see the score of CPI of Denmark, which it has a very good score and also maintain to be in the first rank for the 5 years in a row. Maybe a lot of us will think that, oh, maybe there's very little or maybe zero corruption cases in the country, but it's really interesting to know that there's another side of the situation that and we should look more into besides and beyond the CPI only to know about the anti-corruption movement and also the corruption condition in a particular country. Thank you so much for your presentation. And do you want to
say
add?
and say if I can just add to that.
Sure.
This is the situation in Denmark. You can also see the same situation in Norway and in Sweden. So there's a very, very close collaboration between TI Denmark, TI Sweden, and TI Norway to address this problem at the top issue, because it's similar situation. And my good colleagues in Stockholm and in Oslo, we are facing the same challenges, and we are trying to set up strategies on how we as top CPI countries can work together, because we need to set up global alliances to do this, because we can't, as I always say, and Ingrida has heard me say it before, we are in this together. And that's why we have to work from different perspectives, but we cannot work this country by country approach. We have to set up strategic alliances, and that is what we're doing in a Scandinavian context at the moment.
Yeah, thank you so much for for putting more context and also additional information. And I would like to give the time for the participants to raise the questions. If any of you had some questions, or maybe do you want to dig more into the explanation that already mentioned by Jesper before? And yeah, we have okay, we already have one question in the Q&A box that maybe the speakers can give the answer. I will give the time first for Mr. Jesper to share the answer about the question in the Q&A box. Oh, but it's apparently related to Indonesia situation. Maybe I will give the first opportunity to Miss Tamima, and maybe the other speakers can give another can share another perspective after that. Please, Miss Tamima.
Okay. Thank you for the question. How to stop this habit? Should we cut the generation? I think no. That the corrupt habit is we cannot cut the generation to remove the corrupt habit from the Indonesia public service or public servant. I think one important thing is to create a massive education, integrate the education, and also anti-corruption education as soon as possible, and then we can get the the generation that have a good integrity. Cutting the generation is not a solution actually, because in 2021 I have shocked because the characters is have the same age with me, and then it's young, it's Gen Z, who and she a part of the corruption in Kalimantan at that time. And then it's not a guarantee that when we cut the generation, we can get the better generation. But the most important thing to give the massive education, to raising the awareness, and also um, make the good habit around us, as I said before, in our peers, in our family, in our friendship, and etc. To to just remember each of us that corruption is a bad thing and we cannot do it again. And this discussion is a good step from Indonesia Student Union actually to discuss on corruption movement and to make us closer to the anti-corruption movement.
Thank you, Ms. Tamima. And to give more context, because of the corruption itself in Indonesia is very huge and massively done, especially by the public officials and also the civil servants. And even a lot of people in Indonesia say that corruption is likely part of the culture, and because this kind of habit is really rooted in every in a lot of generation, especially in the older generation that becomes the public officials. This kind of circles when the older generation in the state-owned corporates, or maybe in the older generation as the civil servants, they already do this kind of corrupt activities and corrupt things for almost for all whole the year of their duration when they become in their position right now. So there is an assumption or how to prevent that this kind of circle continue to the next generation that work as the civil servants. And I will give the opportunity to our to another two speakers to give the perspective regarding this matter. And I will go for Mr. Jesper first.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for a very good and an interesting question. One of the things that I would like to raise is that I think we should look into the education and the education system. And let me just share some perspectives from Denmark. If you look to academia in Denmark, corruption is not really discussed among lawyers or the judiciary. We will not have that much contact with researchers from the faculty of law. But where they have the contact and where it is a topic that is a high priority, that is in social science, and that is in business science. So they have a more systematic way of seeing from an education perspective. And if I would advise, that is that you have to work with education, and especially education among civil servants. And if we look at the ethnic background from students, there are a lot of students in the faculty of law that has another ethnical background than typical ethnic Danish. But if we look on social science, where I am a teacher, and I teach as a part-time lecturer in public law at the University of Copenhagen, we have hardly any people of other ethnical background than Danish. And I have always thought about that. Why can this happen? And perhaps one of my theories is that in some of the ethnic environments, being a civil servant is perceived as one of the corrupt. So who wants to have an education as one of the corrupt people? But if you really look into the strengths of the Danish society and the Danish model is that we in general have a public sector with a low level of corruption, and especially among the leaders and also among the top leaders in the Danish public sector, about the permanent secretaries, the under permanent secretaries, etc., and also in the municipalities. So when I was a few years ago, I was asked by the Indian government, what would my advice be? And my advice would be strengthen the education of the public servants. And perhaps this is one of the areas where we have to make some exchange programs. Not that you come to Denmark to have a course in 1 or 2 months. That's not what we're talking about. But what we are talking about, to have the real education in an environment where being a civil servant is some of the finest things that you can actually be. Because we teach them the good culture, we teach them the values, and we teach them also to be very good and effective on that. And I would very much like to also to hear Ismu's perspective on that, because I think that this is one of the areas where we could tackle, and that's also one of the areas where I think we could meet the Gen Z. Because when I meet a generation Z on a weekly on a weekly basis, and I really feel that they have a strong commitment to a better world, to a better society, but they also have a very strong perspective on what's in it for me. And what's in it for me is a world where there's something else that matters, and good values that matter. So I think that is one of the areas, and that's one of the areas where I think we should work much more together in education. But I would very much like to hear Ismu's perspective on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jesper. Ismu, do you want to share your perspective?
Yeah, talking about that, well, it is quite hard to. It is true that the younger generation like me, we often like talk like much more direct, like we want to fight against corruptions, but we are not in the system. But when I talk with the people in the same age, roughly, after joining the system, they are not as vocal as they are outside the system. And when we talk about the education, I know that the people inside the system have like very much what they call it, education about anti-corruption, but it is just like formality. I don't see like they got more education than us outside the system. Like they have like morning briefing about corruption is bad, a slogan in their offices, but I don't see that it is working. So I myself, I don't understand how can we educate the public servants or someone in the system, like you mentioned in Denmark that you teach the public servants about the values. I think we do that, but I don't know why it is not effective, and I don't know like the other alternatives that can be more effective than the current system. So that is my internal questions that I don't know like what is like the alternatives to do that. Yeah. So that's my addition to Jesper's. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ismu, for also sharing the current situation that happened in Indonesia, because apparently a lot of the same situation and also goes with something like a popular quotes that running in the youth of Indonesia, that in the session of election, a lot of people said, let's do the change from the inside, and they make a lot of people to join to running for the election to change the system from the inside. But yeah, just like what Ismu said previously, when they become part of the system, they do nothing different, and they create none of the change to make a better system. And yeah, that's another matter that we can discuss later. But I will also give the opportunity to Ms. Ingrida to share the perspective regarding this matter. Please.
Thank you
Ms.
so
Ingrida.
much.
Mhm.
A great question, I have to say. Very often when we work with healthcare professionals, they tend to focus on the younger generation much more than the other groups, but that's a very personal observation. Like we don't have the data on how many this is being cited in different sectors. And as I mentioned before, healthcare remains one of the areas with still quite a high bribery rates in Lithuania. So, it is quite a sensitive topic, as Jesper mentioned as well, because if it's a health matter, then everyone is willing to help the ones that they love. So the perception there that we quite often hear is that, oh, the younger generation, they come and they are very different. So we just only need to wait for the older ones to leave, and then the younger ones will come and they will change the system. And this is not what's happening. And that's what all of you before mentioned as well, because the newcomers, they come to the system that is in place. And if there is no willingness to change the system from the top leadership and top management of the organization, this is not going to change essentially. And that's something that I tried to emphasize as well before when I shared our rationale of the new law on corruption prevention in Lithuania, that it shifted the responsibility to the different organizations and to the individual organization and to the leadership of those organizations, as opposed to saying, oh, but if it's an issue, then the law enforcement organization will come and they will investigate, and then we will have a court decision, and only then we can start doing something about it. So no, you don't need to wait for the law enforcement to knock on your door. You have to start from the top of the organization and just to set the norm that this type of behavior is not acceptable in our organization. And until this happens, it's very difficult to change it from the bottom. It's possible. It's not that this is impossible, but it does require much more energy and much more people to do that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ingrida, for giving the answer for this question. And also, we have another participants that raising hand. Vicky Suryono, you can give the questions by talk directly to the speakers.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Hello, everybody. My name is Vicky. I'm studying in sociology of law. Just crossed the bridge from Copenhagen in Lund. So just living in a neighbor city from Copenhagen. And I'm also the president of Indonesian Student Association in Sweden. But I have two questions. First for Jesper. So according to my preliminary research, the dominant narrative in the anti-corruption studies is basically about economy and a state administrative law. So if we take a look to the World Bank studies, for instance, or IMF study, they're focusing themselves to prove that how ineffective and inefficient the bureaucracy and the policy or state the administrations in the global south. The question is, does this narrative is still relevant for the global south in order to solve the anti-corruption problems in the global south? Since if we take a look to, let's say, Albert Bandura's studies about the social cognitive study, if we use this theory, we can learn that what stimulates a person to do corruptions is not only about economy, it's also the environments, the social. So it's very complex. And this is what happens in the global south countries. It's very complex. And the corruption is not motivated by economic reasons. That's my first question for Jesper. And the second question is towards Ingrida. So Lithuania and Indonesia basically have the same situations. We just implementing a democracy during the 90s. Lithuania got independence from Soviet Unions, while we got independent from Suharto. Indonesia got independent from Suharto. So basically, we are new in terms of democracy. But it's very interesting that Lithuania have a different case than others ex-Soviet Union countries like, you know, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, or any Central Asian countries that basically fail to implement a very transparent systems after the dissolution of the Soviet Unions. So my question is, what happens with the Lithuania? Why Lithuania and many Baltic and other Baltic countries like Estonia and Latvia are successful to become more transparent after the dissolution of Soviet Union, while the others they are failed to become a transparent and more transparent countries. That's all my questions, and yeah, and thank you for the presentations. I really appreciate. It's really interesting presentations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vicky, for the questions. Please, Mr. Jesper, to give the answer for the first question that Vicky mentioned before.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nikki and Vicky. Sorry, and please come back if I have misunderstood the question about the economic narrative. I would say I always use the narrative in my advocacy, and that is basically because why should we tackle this problem? Because it has an economic impact, and it has an economic impact of all the goals that we want to achieve in the global society. I always say that the United Nations world goals will only be a fancy pin in the rear of policy leaders and nothing else if we don't combat corruption, and especially to the World Bank, the OECD, all the European Union assessment on the economic impact of corruption. And I think that is a strong part of the strategy, and also a strong part of the roadmap to actually do something about it. Let me just take a Danish perspective. In Denmark, there used to be a lot of discussion about tax havens. And why don't the Danish public debate don't like tax havens? It's because they see that they take our money and go to tax haven, and they will have our money. There has been an attitude that money laundering, yeah, that's a problem, but the Danish taxpayers also benefits from money laundering, because, for example, this big scandal on Danske Bank, the Danske Bank earned a lot of money on money laundering, and they pay taxes for it. So there was a little bit of a different perspective. So I often use the economic narrative also, especially to focus on the chains in economic crime, steal, hide, spend, and also that the top countries like Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and other top countries, they have to take on the global responsibility, because and you know, Copenhagen is an easy place to spend a lot of money without getting any attention, simply because it's lots of people have lots of money, and it's very easy to spend a lot of money without making any getting any attention. So we have a global responsibility on that, and we have to be able and we need to focus on the economic narrative, because otherwise we will just support this chain. And the good business people know that Denmark is a good place to do business, but the bad business people also do so. So we are vulnerable. And if you look at the reports from the Danish police on their risk assessment on anti-money laundering, they say the risk is there. We don't see that much activity yet, but the risk is there simply because of the way the system is. So we have to have the focus on that, and I think it's one of the strong arguments in the advocacy.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jesper, for giving the answer. Ms. Ingrida, you may give the answer to the second questions from Vicky.
That's a very good question. Once again, I think a couple of factors are important, but you will never know what's the actual answer there. So one is definitely the size of the country, and Lithuania is much smaller in comparison to Indonesia. Second, culture also plays quite an important effect, and it's not that it's an essential one, but you have to understand what motivates people to act in one way or another. And third, and the most important that we see that worked in Lithuania, is related to the actual driving factor that's driving the change in the country. So in Lithuania, we didn't really lack the motivation from the political leaders to move to the West, because everyone was certain that we definitely do not want to repeat the history of being in the Soviet Union. So the motivation was there, and we knew that that's the only way forward, because the other alternative is the one that we know already, unfortunately. Also, if you look at the map, we are really this eastern frontier of the EU, which became even more evident now with the war in Ukraine. So you really have to invest into the structures and into mechanisms and into the culture in order to avoid the other alternative. So that's the big motivational driver. And then what also helped is actually joining international organizations that pushed for some of the standards in place. So there's research conducted in that regard, that when Lithuania joined the EU, NATO, the OECD, it really helped to push for some of the standards in the country, because everyone wants to join prestigious clubs, you know. So that helped to put the standards in place. But then the other question that still remains, and that's something that I mentioned before, is that you might have regulation in place, but how to ensure that it's effectively enforced and that you actually change the culture, that's the other big question that we need to focus on now.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ingrida, for the answer. And we have one of our friends here, Iman, who raised his hand. Do you want to? Yeah.
Thank you so much for the time. So I have questions for Jesper, only for Jesper, because I can just email Ingrida if I have any questions, because I've been communicating with her. So for Jesper, I have simple questions. What do you think is the biggest investment that we should put on in terms of fighting anti-corruptions, or sorry, fighting corruptions practices that's currently happening? Not specifically have to be in Indonesia, but maybe in in other countries, I would say, like in the general investment, like where should we put more time or energy or money, everything into that sector? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Iman. Please, Mr. Jesper, to give the answer.
Oh, that is that is really a big question. I would say, seen and please forgive me that I now talk from a Danish perspective, but I always say that we need more policemen behind desks. Simply because due to the fact that the politicians they spend a lot of energy prioritizing the fight against crime, public security, and so on. They want visible policemen. And if you ask the head of the Danish police, he say, "I need more policemen and women behind desk." Simply because economic crime becomes more and more complicated, and it will be more and more trans-border economic crime, and we have to see that we have a global economy. So it's not enough that we have a national approach on this. So this is one of the things that I would really say, if we want to invest, we need to invest in better cooperation between police, and also be better to have the right tools to enforcement, and that comes to strengthen the economic system with banks, beneficial ownership, all that kind of stuff that makes it possible to investigate. So that would be my answer number one. The second The second is, and then we come back to make the system work, and that is education, and education of civil servants. And especially, as I always say, a ladder is best clean from the top. So you have to make sure that the education of top leaders in the public service is based on a good, solid education with good values, so that they can actually see that this is a better way. And my final proposal on what we should invest in is that we should to have a real discussion about zero tolerance. Because sometimes I think that we always in anti-corruption environments talk about zero tolerance, that we will have zero tolerance on anti-corruption, and I agree, because we will not accept it. But sometimes zero tolerance is counterproductive, because we have to see and be able to see that there is also a good life without corruption, and there's also a good life after a case that has been enforced. So I simply think that we should work on that, and that is one of the pledges that I always have in the Danish debate, that we should talk more about these problems, because we should show the world how to tackle it, and that you can live a good life after, when you have found out another strategy of life instead of a corrupt life. So more police, men and women behind desk, number one. Second, an education, and thirdly, on invest in approaches that it's not zero. We will not tolerate, but not zero tolerance.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Jesper. So apparently the education still be one of the tools that we can really work on to fight to answering this kind of question and regarding this matter. Thank you so much for your answer. And we have another one questions. I think maybe because of this question is quite long, and I think all of the speakers can give each of their perspective, and maybe this will be the last question for this session, and maybe we can have another discussion outside of this forum, because I believe the speakers are also want to have another discussion. I think I will give the first opportunity to Tamima to give the answer about this question from Andi Isni Pujirana. There are several questions, but one of them is about what is the primary influences that can worsening or maybe reduce the corruption itself in a country, and also what kind of reforms that are necessary to ensure that the law enforcer of the corruption cases can give the more impactful and genuinely restrictive. Please, Tamima, you can give the answer for this question.
Okay, thank you for the question. Like I put on my title of presentation, I think the reform we need a law enforcement reform in many sectors actually, and we are in Indonesia as a coalition of civil society organization always push the reform of law enforcement. I have learned before that to change the behavior, we have to find the motive of the object that we want to change. For example, the law enforcement officials or the corruptors, their motive is wealth, money, and then we have to take it from them. They are not afraid to the prison or the other punishment, but they afraid if we take their money. And then approve the regulation of asset recovery is one of the way to reform our law enforcement in anti-corruption sectors, and we have to push it together. The second one is raising public awareness. I always it's not because I am a public or campaigners of ICW, but I believe for combating corruption, we have to raise the awareness of public, because I always believe in the public powers, and also public power to push the government to push the law enforcement officials to make a reform and to enhance their capacity and the extra to make our country is have the better anti-corruption movement, and then law enforcement reform, and also raising the awareness in many ways in education, or maybe with an entertainment way. We have a lot of creativity and we can apply it to raise the awareness of public to join us in anti-corruption movement.
Thank you so much, Tamima, for the answer. I will give the next opportunity to Miss Ingrida to give the answer regarding this question, please.
Well, to be honest, both questions are very broad, and I'm using this opportunity to summarize the discussion as well. So I would say that it's important to, also building on Tamima's presentation about the context in Indonesia, I would say that it's important to think about both carrot and the stick approaches. So on the one hand, you have to make sure that it's not worth it to engage in corruption for individuals, that they might get fined or that they might get sentences, and that those cases are prioritized by law enforcement institutions, that it's not that it's dragging behind for 15 years and you do not get a result in the end. So really investing in the stick approach, but also you have to focus on carrots, like how do you encourage individuals who want to create change? How do you create positive and good case examples that can help show others that the change is possible and that can motivate the others to continue in that direction? So only when you have the two, I think it's possible to create a more substantive change.
Thank you so much, Miss Ingrida. Mr. Jesper, you can give the answer, please.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, but it is also hard to answer and to find an easy solution. And I think some of it also has to do with the environment and the general perception in the country. However, one of the things that I'm thinking more and more about, and I said it also in my presentation, that is the way we use the word corruption. And sometimes I feel that, and I recognize that this is an area where there's a difference in country by country. As I mentioned, in Denmark, it is no-go saying corruption, because then it will block people from listening to what I'm saying. But I also tend to see, when I look on other countries, that sometimes it is used because it is such a strong word, because it is also such a negative factor, because it erode the system and the way to make the system work, that if you say you are corrupt, no, you can be corrupt yourself, then you suddenly take away the seriousness, because it is going into a political framework, into a political context, that is something you accuse the opponents about, and then suddenly people will not see it because they see it, what's in it for me. And as in the previous question, there is a lot of focus on the economy. So I think the way we should work on it, and I think we should also work on it in a global perspective, and I agree that it has to be taken into various national contexts, but we should focus a lot about communication, and because if sometimes there's a tendency that we are on the good side, but perhaps we are a little bit too good, and that is one of the reasons why we don't always have the same success as we should have, because all research about how corruption hamper the effectiveness in the society, all the way that corruption always take away the money from the poorest people, from the weakest organization. So we are, so to speak, on the good side. But sometimes the way we address it, we should look at ourselves. If the strategies, the way we talk about it, the way we highlight the problem, is that really one of the areas where we are putting up obstacles in our own fight, and we need other strategies, and that's why also in my presentation said that we should focus on the effect, we should focus on the phenomenon, but perhaps not talk so much about corruption or finding another lockery on this. That was my thought, because this is a really difficult question, because we think we always have a tendency to see, if we do that and that and that, then it will be all good. No, it has also something to do with the approach, and that also comes to us as anti-corruption people.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jasper, to give the answer for the question. And I think that's all for our discussion session for today. Thank you so much for all of the three amazing speakers, and also for another attendance that already raising a lot of questions. I hope that our discussion today can give a lot more about a lot of more insights and also information about how we can contribute in combating corruption in our countries. And as the moderator, I apologize if there's any mistakes when I guiding the discussion today. And once again, thank you so much for every one of you. And I hope that we can have another collaboration in the next time. And Mr. Jasper, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I just want to, all of you, just remember, we are in this together.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, that's all for today. Thank you for all the speakers and participants. Hope to see you